Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt Strain, and welcome to the June edition of the National At-Home Dad Network's monthly webinar series. With us today, we have Sonny and Ben Giroux. Sonny and I met a while back when we both were in a group on Facebook called Dads Married to Doctors. This was shortly after I first became a stay-at-home dad. And I still remember to this day, at one point, Sonny's son, Ben, right here, Ben wrote a poem back when he was 10 years old, and it became a huge sensation almost overnight. And I really wanted to bring the two of them on to talk about not just the success that Ben had, but more importantly, the effect that that had on their family. Because, you know, we all want our kids to be successful, but sometimes that success comes and it brings a little bit of troubles and headaches that come along with it. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Sonny and Ben. And hopefully, for starters, if you guys could just tell everybody the story of what happened and how things went down in the beginning, because not everybody knows the whole story.
Well, thank you, Matt, for inviting us on for this awesome interview. This is my son, Benjamin, who's 16, who is sitting here with his baby. He doesn't want anybody. You could show them Monty.
It was going to be a surprise for later.
Oh no, it doesn't need to be a surprise. So that is his 2-year-old corn snake. Well,
soon to be 2-year-old in
Thursday.
4 days.
In 4 days, he'll be turning 2 years old. Monty is, oh, look at that. He's trying to say hi. Giving kisses to everybody. So for the people out there that aren't aware, Benjamin is autistic, was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome when he was 8 years old. My wife is, at the time, when Ben was born, she was a medical student in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Ben was born 2 months premature via emergency C-section. And he spent a week in the NICU and then a week on the peds floor before coming home. And he had a whole lot of health issues the first year that he was born. And so anytime he didn't meet any of the milestones as far as walking or talking or crawling, you know, anything like that, it was always blamed on the fact that he was a preemie. So he was an only child, and all our friends were medical students, and so we didn't have any other child to, kind of, compare Ben to. So everything always just seemed, like a typical newborn should act.
I was the guinea pig.
Yeah. So we from there, my wife started residency, so we moved, and Ben started kindergarten in Pennsylvania at a public school. And from day one, he was deemed the problem child and sent to the principal's office.
First day.
Yeah,
yep,
the very first day. And we had weekly appointments with the school counselor and the vice principal and the teacher to try to figure out what the issues were. And when we moved to upstate New York, where we live now in Plattsburgh, New York, we put Ben in a hockey camp. At the time, he would have been 7 years old. And 3 hours within this hockey camp, one of his coaches was a special ed teacher at one of the local schools here. And she pulled me aside and asked me if Ben was on the spectrum. And at the time, we knew nothing about autism. The pediatrician had said Ben had an anxiety disorder. And, we kind of blamed that on the fact that we moved states, we moved, away from family, we had no friends, pulling him from school. Like, of course, he was going to have an anxiety disorder. Of course, he was going to be, act out or whatnot at school. But as soon as she said that, we talked to the pediatrician and we started the journey of getting him properly diagnosed, which is not a fun journey. With the amount of testing that he had to do, and living in upstate New York, the closest center was in Albany, New York, 3 hours away. So every 4 to 6 weeks, we had to drive 3 hours for him to go through 1 to 2 hours of testing. And this went on for months. And then finally, by his 8th birthday, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, and everything just made sense. Everything just clicked of, all his stimming, just everything started to make sense. Um, so Ben, at the age of 10, was in 5th grade, and for April, for Poetry Month, he was tasked with the job to write an I am poem. Every child in the class were given. So the I am poem, for you that are not familiar with it, is a poem that every line, the poem is started with the words I am, I hear, I feel, I see, I wish, and then the children finish out the lines. So Ben wrote the poem while he was at school on a Thursday. Thursday night, he came home and he had the last 3 lines of the poem to finish up. So he sat down at the table and finished his homework, and then handed us the poem and asked us to read it. Now, Ben, being autistic, whenever he came home, no different than any of your children, I'm sure, when you ask them how their day went, you get a one-word answer of fine, it was good, okay. So that's all we ever got. And then that would be followed up by emails from the teacher saying Ben had a rough day, Ben got in trouble for this, Ben fell asleep during that, Ben had a meltdown, which was always totally different. Then we'd ask Ben about his day, and he's like, oh no, I don't remember that, or oh yeah, that wasn't a big deal, or whatnot. So he handed us his poem, and the poem, my first reaction and my wife's first reaction was how amazing structurally it was. The lines rhymed, the cadence of the words, the imagery of the words were beyond anything a 10-year-old should write. And then once we read it again, then you start really, reading it and realizing that this is our 10-year-old son, and it's like such a cry for help of, I feel different, I know I'm different, and I'm hurting, or I'm sad, but at the same time, there's that glimmer of hope that he understands that we're all different, that we're all odd and unique in our own unique way, which is wonderful. So Ben on the Friday morning had an anxiety attack because he didn't want to read his poem to the class, and he didn't think it was any good. And no matter how much my wife and I would tell him that it was good, he would constantly just say,
"You're my parents, so."
You're my parents. You have to like it. You have to say that. So I said, well, what if I post it to Facebook? And he's like, well, everybody there's your friend, so they're going to like it. And so April, being Poetry Month, is also Autism Awareness Month. So I said, well, what if I put it on the National Autism Association Facebook page? I'm like, that's a public page. And so people will be honest. They'll either say they like it or they don't like it. And he agreed to let me post it on there. So this was a Sunday, probably about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, right before his bedtime. I posted it on there and we went to bed. Monday morning, we woke up and I checked my email and realized that the poem had gone viral overnight. I had emails contacting me, journalists from Australia, Germany, Mexico, England, France. Everyone was contacting us wanting to hear about this 10-year-old boy who had written this masterpiece of a poem that not only shed light on how he felt as an autistic child, but a poem that touched everyone, that everyone could relate to, because everyone's felt odd or felt different or felt like they haven't fit in at some point in their lives. So, every day the poem got shared and shared and shared, and it got translated into 22 different languages worldwide. And about 2 weeks later, the late Anne Rice shared Ben's poem on her social media. And at that point, I realized that how are we going to protect his words? Like how they're all over the place. What do I do? Do I just, let it go? So I took a shot in the dark and I direct messaged Anne Rice telling her how much of a fan I was of hers, and, Interview with a Vampire and all those, wonderful, novels that she's written, and not expecting anything in return. And her assistant messaged me back within minutes saying, we loved Ben's poem. And we had to share it. And he's like, so Beckett, who was her assistant, said, "Do you mind if I send your contact info to our agent?" And I said, "Please." So the next day, their agent, Naomi Davis, contacted Ben and talked to Ben, and she absolutely fell in love with the poem like the rest of the world did. She has a child that's also on the spectrum, so the poem was very personal for her. And she, from that day, said, this needs to be a children's book. This needs to be out there for all children to have access to. And she started the journey to getting it published. So about a year and a half later, she found one of her clients actually was the illustrator Roz McLean out of Vancouver, Canada, and sent Roz Ben's poem with a picture of Ben. And with just looking at the picture of Ben and reading his poem, she illustrated the book and sent it to Ben and asked, what do you guys think? And it was phenomenal. Like the imagery that she came up with for the lines just brought Ben's words even more alive. Ben, had a couple ideas of things to change and to make it a little bit more personal. And then she got the book published by Schiffer Publishing, and this past November the book was released. It's sold out before it's the official release, and it's been receiving accolades since then from Kirkus Review. We just did story time with Barnes and Nobles. It was named one of the 2021's best children's book by Kirkus Reviews, and Ben has been doing appearances and interviews ever since. So that's what brings us here today.
Well, I will say, not that I'm a book reviewer or anything, but we do have a copy of it here at our house. Both my kids have had it read to them. My daughter, who's 8, has actually read it to her little brother, who's 5, but it's on regular rotation for them. Also, again, having grown up in New Orleans, it's not surprising to me at all that Anne Rice reached out to you. Anne Rice was always very, very active in the community when I was living in New Orleans, and really never hesitated to reach out and be helpful to like the little people, so to speak. I mean, she had the kind of money and fame that she didn't have to be that way at all. And she
that's the thing. We contacted so many celebrities that had shared Ben's poem. So people who obviously were aware of Ben, and we messaged them all, for help, or, and Anne Rice was the only one that reached back out to us. And, without her, we would have met Naomi, who, for the last 5 years has been working her tail off to get this book, into bookstores, into schools, into libraries, because she understands just how important Ben's message is for kids everywhere to read.
Now, I know you talked a little bit about worrying about how you could protect Ben's words and Ben's work. As a dad, I'm sure you were incredibly proud. I mean, that goes without saying. But I know that much attention suddenly being shined at one of my kids. I mean, my oldest is only 8, but I know that kind of a spotlight suddenly being on one of my kids would make me really nervous. I would be really worried about what's going to happen and feel really protective. I mean, did you guys have any negatives that came at you after releasing the poem, or was the feedback primarily positive?
Well, all the feedback has been positive. Thankfully, knock on wood, from day one, we haven't gotten any negative feedback. The only negative feedback you'll find online is people doubting that Ben is the one who wrote the poem. Like that, people are like, "Oh, there's no way a 10-year-old wrote that." It's like he wrote it in class in front of his teacher,
Or
yes.
Or the other thing that I told you in the car of like people might doubt me being autistic in the first place.
Yeah. There's no way that he's autistic. It's like, oh no, trust me. If you know Ben, There is no doubt.
Yes, I'm just a very, very good actor. You know, I've been acting my entire life.
Yeah, so thankfully, but yeah, I mean, there was a lot of worry around that when we started getting calls from journalists wanting to do interviews with Ben. That at first it started off local, which was nice because we're in a small town, so most of us know the local news anchors and whatnot. So when we went and Ben read his poem live on television, it was about a week after his poem went viral. They treated him so kindly to have him on and tell his story, and then we decided, obviously Ben is still in school, so whenever people wanted to do interviews with him, we always had them come to the house. So they came on the weekends when Ben was well rested and felt comfortable because we were at the house. So that's where most of the interviews, just like we're doing right now, even through the last 5 years, most of our interviews have been done via Zoom, where Ben feels comfortable and doesn't have to worry about the pressure or whatnot. As far as it's like, well, we live in a small town in upstate New York. We're not in the big city, so we didn't really have to worry about that. Now, as far as his social media and stuff is concerned, I run all of that, so he doesn't have access to that on his cell phone.
Except for one thing.
So every time he gets private messages from people,
he's the buffer.
Yeah, so we'll sit down once a week, and I'll read him the messages. I'll ask him the questions. He'll answer them, and then I'll type the responses back to people. So he has full knowledge of what happens on his social media. He just doesn't have access to it himself to have to worry about that, because obviously school and his mental health are what's most important in all this. We don't want that to be lost, that Ben's poem has helped so many kids feel seen and understand that they're not alone in feeling that they're different or odd, that when they feel sad, that they're not the only ones that feel this way. But with that, I don't want to put too much stress on Ben to make this whole positive experience a negative. So whenever it comes to podcasts or interviews like this, Matt, firsthand that we looked at Ben's schedule, we looked at his calendar, and I was like, Sunday evening will be best for Ben. And so Ben had, and then I asked you to send Ben the questions ahead of time. So these are all things that I've done to make sure that Ben feels comfortable, that he doesn't feel that he's going to get blindsided by a question or something of that nature. So I've taken all the precautions I think that I could. Obviously, people know we live in Plattsburgh, New York, but there is no social media thing of where we live in Plattsburgh, New York. So there's our address isn't out there for people to just show up or whatnot. I
mean, it's possible. I've said before, metadata and photos and stuff is kind of scary.
Now you asked if there was any negatives. Sadly, the only negatives that have come from this is the fact that the kids at his school still bully him. That Ben has to deal with that on a daily basis. And, he gets this outpouring amount of love and support from the internet, from people, like on Wednesday, we were at a local elementary school that's not in our school district. And Ben spoke to almost 500 kids from pre-K through 5th grade. And the feedback that we've gotten from that has been phenomenal, that Ben helped so many children there, and yet his own school have never asked him to read his book or his poem to his classmates. They have assemblies for Autism Awareness Month, yet they don't ask Ben to be part of it.
This year, actually, during Autism Awareness Month, they actually had multiple assemblies during lunch periods about safety on technology instead.
Yeah.
and they're actively not letting me read. Remember the whole high school principal,
so
we don't want him to miss class, so we're not going to let him do
so
stuff.
that's unfortunate. The positive in that is that they can't allow him to get a big ego or anything.
Fair.
As much as he gets great feedback online, he gets to go to school and be treated like he did every day before then. So
I don't even get treated. It's more of a people who just avoid me kind of thing.
Yeah. But
Well, see, and it was interesting as I was about to ask is as these opportunities came about and the offers came in, whether it was the book or some of the other things that we're going to talk about later, was that how, as parents, you guys balance his, well, I mean, for lack of a better term, his career, because Ben is an author now at this point, how you balance his career with his life as, a kid.
Yeah,
I feel like he's in school, you have friends, you have a job now.
Yes, friends. But I feel like my career as an author is no different than my career at my fast food chain. It's just a thing that I do after school, before school, when school's out. It's a matter of, it's basically just another job I have.
Yeah, that's the balance that we created and found that we weren't going to make this a stressful experience for Ben. We were going to make this as positive as possible, and if people couldn't work around Ben's personal schedule, then that's just one interview that we weren't going to do.
It sounds a bit pretentious.
But
it's not.
Well, I don't have time for you, so no.
Yeah, no, it's we want to make sure that he focuses on school, focuses on his education, focuses on his own mental health. That he has time to come home from school. We know that the moment he gets off the bus to get home from school, that he needs his downtime. He needs to decompress. Ben is very much, I use the analogy that he's very much a bottle of soda. And when he starts off in the morning, it starts, people start shaking it. And at some point in the day, somebody needs to twist the cap off. And, if it doesn't happen at school, we make sure that, it happens at home. But, we don't just crack the cap off to make a huge mess everywhere. You slowly open it up to let some of the pressure out to the point where you can open it up. And so we make sure to, do that with Ben, to give him his time. And we know what he enjoys doing. And we know that, if we filled his calendar up on weekends with interviews and book signings and appearances, that he would become resentful and become, not enjoy it and not see it in a positive way. So it's my job as his father to balance that, to make sure that, he gets the positive experience out of it, and, that it doesn't become a negative.
And, again, as a fellow stay-at-home dad, Sonny, I mean, it helps that you're there full time.
Yes, I mean, and that's been since the moment that I've been able to become a stay-at-home dad 9 years ago now. I'm entering my 10th year as a stay-at-home dad, with Ben being my oldest here at 16 years old, and he's got two younger siblings, my daughter who's 10 and our youngest son who's 7. Being at home and being able to take on that primary care responsibility of being at school to do his IEPs, being able to be there, at a drop of a hat, in case something happens at school with a meltdown or whatnot. Thankfully, now that he's older, those have become fewer and far in between. But during elementary school and middle school,
before I was diagnosed.
Well, yeah. Well, not even afterwards, when we were trying to iron out your IEPs to figure out, what the school could do to help Ben, and what were his triggers.
And another sad thing about the bullying thing is it only really stopped, or kind of stopped, when I grew to be 6 foot. Is they used to pick on me a lot when I was smaller, but now that I'm bigger, they just kind of avoid me and don't talk to me.
Tall?
He's 6'3", actually.
Oh, good lord. Okay, so
6'3",
I'm
250 pounds.
5'6", and I'm the tallest person in my family.
Yeah, I'm
We're the little
6'2".
tiny people in my family.
I'm 6'2". Ben is now 6'3".
Mhm.
So yes,
Good for
you
you.
know, he is. We're very thankful that his anxiety attacks and stuff have mellowed out. Over over the last couple of years, because
What is
you
that
know,
supposed to mean?
it means a bear hug from dad when you were much younger, was a lot more helpful than it can be now.
Hulk smash.
Sure. So, for both of you, this has obviously been an amazing experience. I mean, again, I kind of watched this secondhand because Sonny and I are friends on social media, so I got to kind of watch this as it unfolded. But over the course of this experience, like, what has been your favorite moment, Ben? Or do you have one?
I have one, but I don't think it's appropriate to say on air.
Okay, well, I mean, if you don't feel comfortable, then by all
Yeah, I
means,
don't feel
go.
comfortable. What? Oh, well, that's not even that. You haven't even gotten that yet.
Yeah, I've technically already gotten it. I got that a little bit
Well,
at the very
you could,
beginning.
yeah. I mean, he's saying that his positive thing is the paycheck,
Ah,
which
fair.
which which he got a signing bonus when he signed his book deal, which was very minute
Very minute.
compared to but as a at the time he would have been 15, so as a 15-year-old to get a small paycheck, his very first paycheck, that definitely what
Oh
was
yeah,
nice. Um,
yeah.
I would say that over the since this has went viral when he was 10, we've had several, I think, positive experiences. Um, there was one time when he would have been 11 years old. There was a autism that conference that was happening in New York City, and they paid Ben's way down to come down to the conference and put him up in a hotel for the night, for him to come and read his poem to the audience members, which were all people that were in teaching, like teachers, and that were in the, social workers, people that were in the field, for them to get firsthand knowledge from an autistic child of how it feels to be on the spectrum.
That's
The fact
fantastic.
that the fact that you've had these musicians from around the world use Ben's poem as lyrics to songs. There's been at least over a dozen now that were made, but most recently, 3 years ago, a London producer wrote a song. Matt, you're very aware of this song as your kids have constantly requested it. But Mike Canaris, producer out of London, who has ties to Eurovision, who's written songs for Eurovision that have been very successful there, was writing music one day and he couldn't come up with lyrics for the music that he had. And so he went out for a walk around London and pulled out his phone and went on social media and came across Ben's poem. And as he was reading Ben's poem, realized that the lyrics fit with the music that he was producing in the studio. So he went back and put the track down, and then hired a college student to animate a video for the music. And then COVID hit, so we had to put that project on pause for 2 years. And then finally, this fall, we were able to release the film in film festivals, and it won over a dozen awards worldwide, from the New York Film Festival, LA Film Festival, the Hong Kong Film Festival. And we were even nominated for a British Animation Award. Unfortunately, we were up against Netflix, and their $34 million budget beat out our very small college production. And we were up against Ron Gone Wrong, and the Foo Fighters were up for an award too. And so, like those kind of experiences of meeting these people from around the world
Wait, did
who
you
have
get to
all
meet
been
Dave Grohl?
inspired. What's that?
Did you get to meet Dave Grohl?
No.
Oh God, I wish.
I
Yeah,
was
no,
gonna say.
no, no. But like the Mike, who produced this song, and there was this family in Toronto, these children that called Anne's Channel, that wrote a rock song version of Ben's poem. And these are all people that we've built friendships with now over the last several years and got to meet them. And, that they were all inspired by what Ben had to say as a 10-year-old, that he had the courage to put his feelings on paper to share with everyone. So those have been some pretty exciting, now being able to walk into a bookstore and seeing Ben's book on a shelf. That's still unreal when I have friends, when you send me a picture of being at your local bookstore and, and then you turned around and there was Ben's book. It's like, finding out that Ben's book is, I had a friend in Australia who sent me a picture of Ben's book on a bookshelf, in Australia. It's just
That's
like,
awesome.
that's just, nothing that I thought would have happened.
I don't know about some of the other songs, but I do know that the BRM, is it BRM?
Yep, I Am Odd by BRM.
Yeah.
BRM is the initials of everyone that's involved with the song. So
Okay.
B for Benjamin,
I think
R for Rory, who's the young college student who created the video, and then M for Mike, who is the producer. So that's why they went with BRM.
was it intentional that it was in order from youngest to oldest?
No, that was not intentional. But it went with the order of who Mike thought was the most important people.
I mean, it's
to,
also an oldest or
it
youngest
is.
oldest.
Yeah, it is youngest oldest.
But there were, with my poem and book, there were two moments that kind of stuck with me that I remember. The most recent one was when that kid in the meeting called me a hero,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one was that thing with the girl who stood up to her bullies at school. Yeah.
Back in January, I was in town, and I was approached by a grandmother who had purchased Ben's book for her 7-year-old granddaughter who's on the spectrum. Because her granddaughter was on the spectrum and undiagnosed at the time, she had to change schools. So in January, the 7-year-old was at a brand new school, and 2 weeks in to the new school, she was still being bullied by the kids on the playground. And one day, these kids went up to her and called her weird, and she just looked at them and said, "Yes, I am weird. And that's okay, because Ben's book says it's okay. So you can call me weird, that's a good thing."
Oh, that's
And the
incredible.
fact that a 7-year-old, girl who, stood up to her bullies because she read Ben's book, I mean, if Ben's book doesn't do anything else, and ever, the fact that he positively changed this young girl's life is phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and then these are things that that his book are doing. So we're very very happy that that this kind of thing, these kinds of stories are out there and happen because of his words.
Oh, that's fantastic. Now, I was going to say, I know that the song that BRM did is available on YouTube along with the video, which I would like to point out as an animation fan. The animation's fantastic. It really, really is very, very well done.
And that Rory's a 20-year-old college student in London, England, and that was her first animation video she's ever done. So
Yeah,
it was phenomenal.
it is fantastic. You sent me the link literally like the day it became available.
Yeah.
And I played it for my kids and my wife. And for the next week and a half, every time we got in the car, I would plug in my phone and my children would yell at Google to play I Am Odd, I Am New. And it would play in the car repeatedly everywhere we went. And
Yep.
Honestly, it's a great song. It's very catchy. I highly recommend people go look for it. Now, I know in addition to YouTube, you can buy it on Spotify, right?
Oh yeah, it's on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music. Yeah, it's
Awesome.
everywhere. It's an actual legit song that is out there. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and your local bookstore can find a copy of Ben's book. I know the copy that we picked up off of Amazon.
Yeah,
Just
it's
because
currently
we
on
bought
sale
it.
on Amazon for 20% off, actually.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, it's available. Any book retailer, you support your local bookstores and stuff. But right now, you can get it for 20% off on Amazon.
I was gonna say we picked it up at the beginning of the pandemic, and at
Mhm.
that point, all of our local bookstores were shut down.
Yeah.
And Amazon was the only option. Otherwise, trust me, we would have been at
Yeah.
our local independent one. Um, Now, this one's addressed to Ben. What's next? I mean, obviously you're finishing school. Are
Very
you?
simple question. I've written two other books, and one
Really?
of them is being shopped around. The other one needs to be edited, and there's a third one that I just have in my head, and they're all about this little guy.
Awesome. They're all about the snake. That's
Yeah.
sweet.
So the
One more thing
oh,
before you start.
yeah.
It is super ironic, the story.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah. This goes back. It starts back a year ago now. All three of my kids were virtual because of COVID, obviously. So we had being a stay-at-home dad, I was able to keep my kids home, which we did because I was able to. And at the same time, it took three kids off the bus. It took three kids out of the school system to allow the schools to give more space to the kids who didn't have the option of being at home. Um, and so Ben and his siblings spent way too much time on electronics for that 18 months of basically being virtual school or homeschooled. And last summer, it got to the point where Ben was spending way too much time on his electronics. And I had told Ben that he needed to get off of his electronics and write something. I wanted him to either write in his journal, write a poem, write a story, just something to, kind of get off the electronics. And, so he had no idea what to write about. And he just kept saying, what do we want me to write about? What do we want me to write about? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, just write something. And I'm like, and then it hit me that, Monty, his pet corn snake Monty, who's named after Monty Python,
Well
was,
done parenting there,
you know,
sir. Well done.
Huh?
you said well done.
Oh yeah, his
Okay.
his full name is Monty Montgomery Cornsnake.
There you go.
The Montgomery comes from a series of unfortunate events. Montgomery,
Yes.
Montgomery. Yeah.
Yeah. So I said, write about, adopting Monty. Write a story about adopting Monty. And this guy sits down 15 minutes later, hands me
A
a
manuscript.
manuscript and says, "How's this?" And it's just, I have, in the last 5 years, I've now gotten to meet a lot of authors. We're part of this, the debut author group. There's 8 of us in this group that help each other on social media because they're all first-time authors. They've all had these children books coming out or that came out in 2021. And, we helped each other navigate the book signings, this, that, how to get into libraries and all that. So I've gotten to know a lot of authors. And, they tell me that it takes months, if not years, of revising and coming up with ideas and stuff like that. And this kid sits down and 15 minutes later has this manuscript on a children's story about Monty being adopted. And so the reoccurrence is that it's Monty in a bookstore and Monty looking across and seeing all these other pets being adopted and wishing that he was more like the other pets so that he could find a home. So it's Monty looking at the dogs and going, I wish I was like a puppy with the big floppy ears and the drooly kisses and the wagging tails. Maybe then I'd find a home. And it's Monty, the snake, with dog ears and a dog tongue. And then you flip the page, and it's like, I wish I was like the kittens with cute little whiskers and a fun purr. Maybe then I'd find a home. And it's the snake with kitten ears and the whiskers and purring wrapped around a ball of yarn. And it goes through all these different animals wishing he was more like them, pointing out all the wonderful characteristics of these other animals, wishing he could find a home. And then at the end, this little boy walks in and walks past all these other cute, cuddly animals and stops in front of the snake and says, I'm looking for a pet that's quiet, easy to take care of, and that gives the best hugs. And Monty realizing, I'm the perfect pet. And the boy puts his arm in the enclosure, and Monty says, "I do give the best hugs." And he wraps himself around his arm and squeezes. And the boy adopts Monty and takes him home. And Monty, realizing that he didn't need to change anything about himself, that he was perfect just the way he was. And it's like you read that, I'm like, oh my goodness, like the reoccurrence of I wish I maybe then I'd find a home. And it's just so heartbreaking that this snake wants to be anything but a snake, to be adopted, and at the end realizing that he doesn't need to change. So yeah, so now
The ironic part, you have to say the ironic part.
his agent is currently shopping that book around, and she absolutely loves the book, almost more so than the I Am Odd book. And right now we've gotten actually 3 rejections from major publishers because they're afraid that people won't buy books about snakes, and asked if we could change it to a puppy or a kitten. And it's like the irony of people like dismissing books about diversity, and make them less diverse. So yeah.
All I can say on that one is as a former goth kid who listened to a whole lot of Bauhaus back in the day, trust me, there's a lot of Snake fans out there.
Right?
If any of the publishers are listening, trust me, there is a market. A lot of us goths are now in our late 40s and 50s.
We spoke about this Wednesday when he went to the elementary school, and there wasn't a single child there that didn't think that it was the coolest thing. We showed them pictures of Monty, and they all fell in love with it. They all thought it was like the greatest story. And then the next book that he wrote is Monty Goes to School, and it's about the little boy taking Monty to show and tell, and same type of story that Monty sees the other animals on at show and tell, and wishes he had strong, powerful legs like the rabbit so that he could hop, wishing he had the wings like a bird so he could fly, because he's just a snake. He doesn't have these cool, features.
Yeah, I don't even have any limbs.
And then at school, while the kids are at recess, all the animals escape their enclosure and make their way out into the hallway, and the door closes behind them, and they need to get back in before recess is over so they don't get trampled. And the rabbit tries to kick the door and can't kick the door down. And then the bird flies up but can't open the handle because the door's locked from the inside. The hamster and its cool ball rams the door and can't open the door. And they're all like, oh no, what are we going to do? And then they all look at Monty and say, wait a minute, you can do this. And then Monty slithers under the door and opens the door, and all the animals get safely back into their enclosures before recess is over. So it deals with body shaming. It deals with anxiety and depression, all from a kid's point of view. And it's, it definitely is a series of books I wish I had, access to when I was a kid. So
I was going to say, we need more of these kinds of books out there in the world. I do have to say, your poem connected with me. I grew up being a weird kid. I was the kid that played Dungeons and Dragons and spent a whole lot of time in the library. Got my fair share of bullying as a kid as well. My daughter loves your book. She is a little busy right now. I would invite her in, but if she comes in, she will take over the call. My daughter is the one who has the pink and purple hair that is shaved on one side because that's the way she wants her hair to look. And, we're lucky in the fact that living where we live in Durham, North Carolina, it's a relatively open-minded liberal community. She's not the only kid with brightly colored hair at her school, but there aren't many.
I mean, you have brightly haired color too.
I actually did mine after her.
Oh, sure.
What are you talking about now?
Sure.
We all know that's your natural.
Yeah, no. She started first. Hers was purple first. And it was after hers was purple for a couple of months that I looked up and realized, wait a minute, I'm a stay-at-home dad. My bosses are like 6 and 3. Dress code is so loose here. And so I dyed my hair bright red, which is the first
all you need now is like a mullet or a mohawk.
I did the mohawk back when I was much, much younger. I can't do the mohawk now because it would only go to about here because there's this big empty spot back here. And,
I guess the mullet is out of the question
spot
too.
in the middle is not a good look.
You say that dress code is dress code is totally optional in our careers.
See that? No, that doesn't sound good.
Well,
No,
we're all
Saying that dressing is optional.
yes, because we're all stay-at-home dads. So dressing is totally optional.
okay, we have a uniform. We have a uniform. It's cargo
Yeah.
shorts and a t-shirt.
No, that's
Yep.
not what
New
he's
Balance
saying
sneakers,
or what
and
I'm
you're in
saying.
business.
We're saying
Which I am totally rocking the cargo shorts right now and my trophy husband T-shirt.
Yeah, see, I've got my number one dad T-shirt.
There you go.
I'm still surprised that we're just walking past the fact that he said that being nude was optional.
Yeah,
I said it was
That's what you said.
optional.
You said that clothing
It
was
said
optional.
dress code was
You said
optional.
clothing was optional.
The dress code was
Yes.
optional.
Dress code, clothing, optional.
We're
You can
gonna go
interpret
with
it. I mean, it's
Right.
true.
Moving on.
Guys, I really want to thank you guys for your time. I really appreciate y'all coming to talk to us. I know that we've got a wide spectrum of stay-at-home dads out there that are part of the National At-Home Dad Network. We've got kids of all ages, dads of all ages, and I think it's really, really great to hear from you and to hear about your success. The last question that I have is specifically for Ben, and that would just be, what advice do you have for all the people out there who do feel different and do feel like they don't fit in?
Very simple. Find your people. That other people might not accept you. Other people might think that you're weird and that you don't belong. But yeah, it's just because you haven't found your people. You got to find your people.
Well, you can't say it any better than that. You really
Yep.
can't. So,
I mean, and that goes for for all us watching. We're all stay-at-home dads. We're all chose a career path because we're all married to such strong women, and we had to find our people, and we have through this wonderful group that we're all associated with. So that definitely is true words.
well, look, on behalf of the National At Home Dad Network and parents out there everywhere who may be watching this now or down the road on our YouTube channel, I want to thank you again for giving us a little bit of your time. We will be announcing our June webinar in the coming weeks, and June. Sorry, briefly lost track of time there. Our June, no, this is June webinar in the coming weeks. And again, thanks for your time, and I hope everybody has a great day. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Thank you for having me.